Toledo Men Today is a production of KWLB Radio, and views expressed in this program are not the views of Illini Cablevision.
Very pleasant good evening. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope your day is going well in Sabine County, Sabine Parish, and of course in Vernon Parish. You know, I guess this area probably is one of the greatest lovers of country music. Our guest today is a person that was very close friends with Roy Acuff. Robert Gentry, he's the owner and editor of the Sabine Index, has quite a display of Roy Acuff memorabilia as well as Civil War and other political and country music items at the Manny Pawn Shop, where you have a museum. Robert, first, we're glad to have you with us. Thanks for being on the program.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation to be here.
How did you come up? First, let's talk about the museum you have for a moment. How did you come up with the idea of having a museum there at Manny Pawn Shop?
I had been a collector of just different things all my life, ever since I was a little kid, and anything that I could get a hold of that was odd, interesting, unusual, old, historical, I always hung on to it and kept it. And I got to the point where every spare room that I had was full of stuff, and I either had to get rid of it or find me a place to put it on display. So when I opened the Manny Pawn Shop about 5 or 6 years ago, I decided that a part of it would be some of the items that I had collected down through the years that I thought people might be interested in looking at, and that's how it got started about 3 years ago, and I've just keep adding to it as time goes by.
One of the great legends, Roy Acuff. First, tell us how you developed a friendship with Roy Acuff, because I gather it was after he became very popular, and tell us a little of the early days of your relationship with Roy.
Okay, to begin with, back when I was a child, my family and I always listened to the Grand Ole Opry and enjoyed doing that. And of course, that was when Roy Acuff was in his prime, and he was kind of my hero at the time and had always been down through the years. And I finally got to meet him on a personal basis back about 1980. I'd seen him quite a few times prior to that, but in 1980 I did an interview with him, and it was a friendship that clicked from the very first time we met, and we continued that friendship up until the time he died. And I would visit with him on occasion at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville 3 or 4 times a year, and he came down to Rebel Park, which we were operating at the time, on 3 different occasions. So we just had a mutual respect for each other and a very good lasting friendship.
I want to start the videotape of some of the things you'll see. I want to tell you the Manny Pawn Shop is located across from the it's very easy to locate. Phone number is 256-0523, area code 318 if you're in Texas. I want to start off right with this because I think this was the first coin of any country music singer that was ever minted. These are, as I understand, the plates or whatever. Tell us about this.
Okay, this was a coin that we minted to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Roy Acuff as a member of the Grand Ole Opry. And we issued those in 1987, which was a year before his 50th anniversary, which was in 1988. And I might add, since we're talking about it, that it was at your suggestion that we issued these coins. After you suggested it, then I got Roy's approval, told him what I'd like to do, and he was very delighted that we would do this. So I had Rivers Murphy, who's head of the art department at Northwestern, design this coin, and we issued them in gold, silver, and bronze, and we presented the first copies to Roy on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry in 1987.
Now, are any of these still available? If they are, how can
Yes,
someone
yes,
get
we
them?
still have those available at the Manny Pawn Shop. We've sold out all the gold ones, but we still have silver and bronze ones available at the Manny Pawn Shop.
And if they want to talk to you about these, I mean, like I say, this is, to my knowledge, still probably the only coin that has been minted of a country music legend, and great gifts for people who are Roy Acuff fans. And I gather you have those people all over the country. Again, how can they get in touch with you personally to talk about these coins?
By mail addressed to me at Post Office Box 850, Manny 71449, or calling me at area 318-256-3495, or if at night, 256-2886, and I'd certainly be happy to talk with anyone.
Some of the silver and bronze are still available?
Yes, they are.
Is this a limited edition?
This is a limited edition, and we probably have less than 100 of the silver coins and maybe 200 bronze ones left.
You know, I guess one of the greatest surprises, people are looking at this poster and saying, Roy Acuff, governor? Roy Acuff ran for governor?
Right. This was in 1948. He ran for governor of the state of Tennessee after having been urged for about 6 years to run. He always rejected it, but he decided in 1948 to run, and he ran as a Republican, and while he didn't get elected, he ran a very commendable race, and at the time in 1948 it was very unusual for a Republican to run very good in the South, but he ran very good.
You know, one of the things, Robert, that we want to show us some of the memorabilia there. Let's bring back up the fiddle that's on. Is this one that Roy actually played, and if so, what were some of the tricks he could do with it?
Okay, that is a fiddle that Roy used in his act for many years. He used it at he told me when he gave it to me in 1984, he told me, he said, this is a fiddle that I have used on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry and in my appearances around the world. And also the yo-yo you saw with that is on display, which he also used in his act. And Roy was very good with the fiddle. He could balance it on his chin. He would somehow attach the bow to the fiddle and balance it on his chin in a lot of different ways. And he was a very entertaining person on stage. And I guess to kind of put things in perspective for a lot of people who didn't know a lot about Roy Acuff, he was really the Garth Brooks of the 1940s and early 1950s. He was the top man in country music.
You charge anything to see the displays on Roy?
No, everything we have is free, and we just enjoy people coming in and looking at the things we have, and I enjoy talking with people about it, and it's just really a lot of fun for people to come in and look and enjoy it.
And you have a full-size, I forget the name of it, but it's a lot like almost like a wax statue of Roy there at the museum?
Yes, we do. This is a lifelike figure of Roy, and it was made by an artist down in Port Allen, Louisiana, and it contains Roy's suit that was owned and worn by Roy, the shirt, the tie, and his shoes, and he gave me those items the summer before he died, so the lifelike figure is as much like Roy as we could get it, including his clothes.
Tell us about this check.
Okay, this is a copy of a check that Roy wrote to Tex Ritter back in 1943. No, that Tex Ritter wrote to Roy, excuse me, back in 1943. It's on the Bank of California at Hollywood, and the check is for $20, and it's for a gambling debt. And Roy never cashed the check, but he wrote a little note on it. He said, Tex Ritter is such a fine man that I couldn't cash this check. And for years that check hung on display in his dressing room at the Grand Ole Opry.
That's amazing. Yeah, this is a really early shot here of Roy Acuff. He always had a certain look about him, didn't he?
He really did.
You know, talking about Roy Acuff and some of the great things that's taken place, and we'll start the video back again. The museum, what other items does it have in it besides Roy Acuff? Okay,
and what I might add that we really have the largest collection of Roy Acuff memorabilia in the world, as far as I know. But in addition to the Roy Acuff items, we have a lot of items on country music artists, both from the days of the Louisiana Hayride in Shreveport, from the Grand Ole Opry and other items. We have a lot of Civil War items, especially Civil War items from the Red River Campaign, which includes items from Grandicord, Natchitoches, Pleasant Hill, and Mansfield. We also have items from those cowboys of the silver screen, Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, Lash LaRue. We have a lot of Indian artifacts, probably the largest Indian artifacts collection anywhere in this area of the state. We have a lot of items that are just odd, interesting, unusual, movie memorabilia, movie posters, old tools, political items. We have a nice section on some of the political figures from Louisiana and the nation, and just a big assortment of different things.
You know, we're going to have a program one day on politics and get Robert on with that, but Robert has the most unique item that I guess, to my knowledge, it's the only one of its kind. It's a portrait of the 4 presidents, and that of course being Bush, Reagan, Carter, and Ford? Nixon. And each one have personally autographed one photo. Robert, tell us the story about you getting President Nixon's autograph on that.
Okay, I had finally accumulated that the picture of 4 presidents, which is very unusual that you could get 4 presidents in one picture. So when I obtained that picture, I asked a good friend of mine, former Congressman Joe D. Wagoner in Shreveport, if he could help me in getting President Nixon to autograph those pictures. So he said he would try, and I sent it to him, and never did hear anything back from him. And in the meantime, President Nixon died, and about 2 weeks later, I received a package in the mail from former Congressman Wagner, and to my amazement and surprise was the autographed picture of President Nixon. And I found out that he autographed it before his stroke, and he died, I think, 6 or 7 days after he had his stroke. So it turned out to be one of the last pictures that President Nixon autographed, and later I got the other 3 presidents to autograph it. And I'm in the process now of finding out from the government when the picture was taken, because each item I put in the museum, I like to try to have a little story about the history of it, and as soon as I obtain that information, I will have that picture on display.
Well, you actually got the autograph of President Reagan just a few weeks ago, didn't you?
Yes, sure did. I got that autograph with the assistance of Congressman Jim McQuarrie, and it is very, very hard to get an autograph from President Reagan. So I was very fortunate.
I want to go back to the video and show you one of Roy Acuff's favorite things to do. I guess like people in Sabine Parish, the Sabine Index is kind of popular to him.
Right. Everybody reads the index, and this is a picture I took in his dressing room at the Grand Ole Opry when he was looking at a copy of the Sabine Index, and I sent him, I had an enlargement made on that picture and sent it to him and asked him to autograph it for me. And I think he wrote, when I'm in Sabine Parish, I always read the Sabine Index.
Roy Acuff, was he a person of the elitist? Was he a person of the common man? Tell us something about it.
Roy was a very, very common person. He was very sincere. He was the kind of person, when he told you something, his word was his bond. You didn't have to get him to sign a contract. If he told you something, he would do it. He was a man that had a lot of wisdom. He had a lot of humor about himself, and his mind was still just as sharp and keen as could be when he died almost at the age of 90. And if he was your friend, he was very loyal to you, and he would remain your friend as long as he thought you deserved that friendship. But he was the kind of person that it was very hard to become his friend, and I was very fortunate to be classed as one of his friends.
Who do we have in the photo here?
Okay, that's a picture that was also made in Roy's dressing room, and the guy on the right is Bill Monroe, a member of the Opry, who is often referred to as the father of bluegrass music. Next to him is Roy, and the young lady is Bobby White, who was Roy's companion after Roy's wife died in the early 80s.
How long has Mr. Acuff been dead?
He died in 92, I believe, if I recall right.
Still a lot of interest in Roy Acuff at this point?
Yeah, I think so, quite a bit. Not as much as when he died, but there is still a lot of interest in him. And from time to time, I still have people who order coins, and I'm also a dealer of country music memorabilia, and I have people call me frequently wanting items concerning Roy Acuff.
The coins, this is one we talked about earlier. What is this actually here?
Okay, what we're looking at, when you make a coin, the first thing you have to do is have a drawing, the artwork of what you want on the coin. So the first thing is to get an artist to do it, and then from that picture, the mint makes what they call a plaster cast, and that white round thing is actually a plaster cast of that coin. And from the plaster cast, they make a die, which is a highly polished item that they use to stamp the coin with. Then they make gold, silver, and bronze blank coins, and from those coins they use the die to stamp the coins and make them.
Roy Acuff, see a person of great financial means. There was a company called Acuff Rose Publishing. Tell us something about him financially.
Okay, financially, Roy, I think I've heard estimates that when he died, his estate was worth anywhere from $18 to $24 million. But he was a very prudent person. He had a maid who would come in every other day and do what little work needed to be done around his place. When he would eat supper, he would clean up the kitchen, wash the dishes himself. He had no secretary. His daughter-in-law took care of what correspondence he needed to do. He was a very common man, and as far as money was concerned, very prudent with his money.
Person of ethics?
Very, very high ethics. He had tremendous moral values himself, and he expected the other people that he associated with to be persons of ethics. The members of his band had worked for him for many years, the oldest being Bashful Brother Oswald, who worked with him for 54 years, I think. And I asked Roy one time, I said, in this music business, you see so many bands that change personnel so often, but people who work for you have worked for you for many years. How do you find people who stay with you? And he said, Robert, the most important thing is I hire people who have character. If they don't have character, they won't work for me. And if they have character, they're good people. And if you do them right, they'll do you right.
Who's in the photo here?
That's a picture of Roy on the left and Bashful Brother Oswald, who we talked about. That's on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry back in the early 1960s at one of their shows.
Is that an actual hat he wore?
That's a hat that Roy wore on Charlie Daniels had in Nashville, what he used to call the Volunteer Jam, which was a big musical program. And he invited Roy to be on that show one time, and Roy went out and bought him a hat and wore to that. And he told me later when he gave me that hat that he never did wear a hat very often. The last time he could remember wearing one was up in Chicago when they were doing a show there, and he said he walked out of the motel onto the street in a brand new Stetson hat, and the winds of Chicago blew it off his head, and it aggravated him, and one of his boys ran down the street, retrieved the hat, and brought it to him, and he said he put the hat up and never wore it again, and that was the first time he had worn a hat in many years, and he was nice enough to autograph it and give it to me.
I guess Roy was originally on, what, 78 records?
Yes, he started off on 78 records, one of the few artists that started off on 78s and then went to the 45s and the 33 and the third albums, cassettes, CD tapes. He made the whole round before he died.
Well, as an example there, Waltz of the Wind. How old a record would that be?
That was back in probably 1942 or 1943. That was the sheet music to it right there. And back in his younger days, sheet music was very popular, and every record he put out, he also published sheet music to it and sold a lot of that.
How long would it take someone who really wanted to stop, observe, enjoy everything? How long would it take them to go through the museum?
Oh, probably at least 3 to 4 hours to really look and read and see everything. And you could cover it pretty well in an hour or 2 hours, but to really do it about 3 or 4 hours.
Okay, for the people who live on, and this is what we were talking about, this is a life-size, what do we call it?
figure is the best
Okay.
word I can come up for.
Always want to compare it to like in the Wax Museum, whatever, but this is a life size of Roy Acuff, and this is on display there as well. And the suit and everything is actually a suit that was worn by Acuff.
Yes, it is.
People who live in East Texas, people who live in Vernon Parish, may not be as familiar with Manny Pawn Shop. How do you get there? Again, is there any charge?
Okay, never a charge. We're located on San Antonio Avenue, which is the main street running through Manny, and we're across from People's State Bank and the Sabine Index, right almost in the middle of downtown Manny.
I want to again show you the lifestyle look at Roy Acuff. You can go ahead and start the video back again, Kent. But all of this is information there that was available. Any idea how many items you've got dealing with Roy?
I would say probably on display at least 150 to 200.
The fiddle that he's got in the showcase there, is that one that he actually played, or is that from him?
No, that's just a prompt that we use. The fiddle that he actually gave is on display in another little section.
While he was alive, did he ever get to see this, or was this done after his death?
No, he never did. In fact, when I wrote and asked him to let me have that suit to go on the figure of him, his daughter-in-law wrote back this quote, "Roy said that if you had a little money to pay him, he would come around your place and stand up for nothing, or stand up very cheap," something like that. Anyway, he had a lot of humor to the very end.
What is the, I guess, we're getting kind of close to the end of the program. What's the thing that you remember the most about Roy Acuff? I mean, what's the biggest impact that he had on your life, and you think on a lot of other people's lives?
I think probably that he was a man of his word, his sincerity, and that when he told you something, you could count on it, and that if you were his friend, you were really his friend, because he didn't have a lot of friends. And I'll never forget one time he played at Rebel Park, and I took him back to the airport here in Manny to catch his airplane, and he made this remark. He said, "Robert, I want to tell you how much your friendship means to me, and we're friends because you don't want anything out of me. Most people that try to befriend me want something," and he said, "You don't want anything, and that's why we can be good friends."
You know, you told me a story one time I thought was very interesting about a gentleman in Montgomery or somewhere in the area that he befriended. Tell us that story.
Okay, the first time I interviewed Roy, he asked me, he said, "Do you know a person that lives in Monterey, Louisiana, named Jackson Pecaney?" And I said, "No, Monterey's quite a ways from Manny, but I have a brother-in-law that lives in Monterey, and we visit them." And he told me about the guy, and I said, "Tell you what I'll do, the next time I'm over that way, I'll look him up." And Roy said, "I tell you what I wish you would do. I wish you would bring him up to the Opry with you sometimes. I would like to meet the gentleman." He said, "If I wasn't so old, I would drive down there one day and meet him myself, but I can't do that. Would you mind doing that?" And I said, "I'll be happy to." So I brought Jackson up to the Opry to visit him, and they just delighted in seeing each other. It was the first time they had met, and they hugged each other like long lost friends. And Roy went to a little cabinet in his dressing room, and he had a stack of letters tied in a red ribbon, and he had kept every letter that Jackson Pecaney had ever written him. And down through the years after that, he continued to keep those letters, and I guess when Roy died, those letters were still in his dressing room wrapped in a red ribbon. But every time I would bring Jackson up to the Opry, Roy would give him a $100 bill and say, "Jackson, I don't want this to cost you any money. I want to take care of it."
What was his favorite drink?
Canadian Club and cranberry juice.
That's amazing.
And I had never seen anybody who drank that, and I said, "Why? How did you ever come about making a mixture of this?" He said, "Well, I've always known that whiskey was good for you, and the doctor told me to start drinking cranberry juice, and I found out from him it was good, so I knew the two of them mixed together had to be good."
Robert Gentry is our guest today. We're talking about Roy Acuff. Complete display available for you, unbelievably free. all they want you to do, he wants to share this with the people of the area. Come by and take a look at it. It's located inside Manny Pawn Shop, which is across from the Sabine Index, which is downtown Manny on San Antonio Avenue. We're going to have Robert back on in a couple of weeks. We're going to talk about the Civil War. You know, Robert, you have hunted Civil War artifacts, I guess, forever. And most people don't realize what a very strong area this was during the Civil War.
Right, this area is very strong. The Federal and Confederate troops both came up the Red River to Alexandria and on up to Natchitoches, or Grandicore at the time. And from Grandicore, they marched by foot through Robeline, Marthaville, on to Pleasant Hill, and on to Mansfield, where the Federals were basically defeated at Mansfield and Pleasant Hill, and then they retreated back through to Grandicore, caught the boats, and on down the Red River. But a lot of troops, Confederate troops from Texas, participated in the Red River campaign. So those troops crossed the Sabine River down at Burr's Ferry, Pendleton Ferry, all up and down the Sabine River where they had crossings, and marched through much of Sabine Parish, including Manny, on their way to Pleasant Hill and Mansfield.
Of all the items you've got in the, what do you think is your greatest find, or the greatest item you've got, or the most significant to you or to whoever with the?
I guess that probably what I enjoy most are the items that I have found myself at Grandicore and Pleasant Hill. I have a lot of mini balls, which are the bullets that were used in the guns, rifles, and shotguns back in those days. And they made elaborate belt buckles back in those times. I have some nice belt buckles. I have some sabers that I found. I have cannonballs and mortar shells, things like that. I guess the items that I really like best are those that I personally found.
We want to thank Robert Gentry, the owner and editor of the Sabine Index, and also the owner of Manny Pawn Shop and the museum that's attached to it, for being our guest today. We'll be back in a week or two with a similar program about the Civil War and all the great things that you can see in the museum there. We showed you a very small portion of the items. To see for yourself, just stop by. He'd love to have you. He set it up for other people. It's your opportunity. For our Toledo Bend today, I'm Ted Dumas. Thanks for watching.
Maximum 100% financing at Sabine State Bank. More families and individuals may be eligible to become homeowners with the help of USDA or FMHA guaranteed loans. Through the Guaranteed Rural Housing Loan Program, you may qualify even without a down payment. 100% financing home loans up to $77,197 based on 9.625 APR 30-year fixed rates. For more information, call Bob Gilbert or Henry Sable at Sabine State Bank. APR subject to change without prior notice.